What is it with people on April Fool's Day? Did they think that releasing a job on April 1st would make people think it wasn't actually happening? Yeesh. I am, of course, talking about Diabolic Esper. He was released on April 1st in some servers, but in the North American server, he was instead released a day earlier on March 31st, and he marks the culmination of AD's third and final job path, which started with Time Tracer a few weeks back. So, let's go ahead and take a look at... Dang it! Once again, there are absolutely no puns to make about Diabolic Esper. So, this is Diabolic Esper. Diabolic Esper is the second and final job in AD's Time Tracer path. Story-wise, it follows AD's attempt to go back in time to rescue his family, an endeavor which he had spent much time preparing for. To his shock and surprise, he found that his attempt to return to his past was unsuccessful, and he was instead met with a timeline where his family was actually alive and happy. Enraged by his failure and inability to control his timeline, Diabolic Esper was driven into insanity, spiraling out of control, to put it lightly. He carries with him powers in the same conceptual vein as Time Tracers with time and space manipulation techniques. With all that said, as per usual, let's start by taking a look at his combos. As is typical of second jobs, Diabolic Esper receives two combos which act as extensions of his existing combos. The first is Spark Acceleration, executed by performing XXXZ. After AD's usual Energy Blast kick moves, Diabolic Esper rushes forward and hits his target with a sphere of energy, dealing magical damage. In Awakening mode, this move is altered slightly to have Diabolic Esper instead launch the attack sphere. It's a handy move for getting close up to your enemies or for catching enemies like Blood and Man-Eaters that like to run away. The other is Time Hole, executed by performing XXXX, and works similarly to Spark Acceleration. The big gotcha here is that AD instead pulls his target violently towards him instead of charging at them. In Awakening mode, he does extra damage with his energy sphere by kicking it at his target. I found this to be really useful, though it had some rather silly side effects. Look at them go flying. Oh good god, I'm going just as insane as AD. Again though, this move is really handy for catching enemies that just don't want to stay still. Both combos are actually really handy and lend themselves well to getting good Nasod armor combos while in Awakening mode, if you're into that kind of thing. The only downside I really found is that neither move seems effective against flying mobs in the least, but whatever. In the end, his combos aren't that bad and could easily be worse for sure. If you watched the Time Tracer video I did previously, you'll know how much Time Tracer, and thus Diabolic Esper, has to rely on his abilities to make his class what it is. So, let's first start by taking a look at the passives that make Diabolic Esper unique. Mind Control is his first passive at level 35, and gives Diabolic Esper a chance to recover some of the MP or DP expended when using skills, as well as giving him an increased immunity to certain debuffs including Stun, Confusion, and a few others. It's a neat passive and actually quite useful, though I will honestly admit I never noticed it proccing. Still, I'm willing to bet that it was being very helpful in its silence. Time Control is available to Diabolic Esper at level 45 and works kind of similarly to Mind Control. In this case though, he receives a few percentage points of attack speed increase while also having a chance to reduce his cooldown on most skills. Except for Seal of Time and his Hyperactive of course, because who would want reduced cooldown on that, am I right? I noticed this move proccing a little bit more than Mind Control because sometimes the cooldown is reduced substantially enough to be noticeable. At level 60, Diabolic Esper is given a slightly awkward choice between Mind Circle and ESP. Mind Circle is a pretty simple passive that lets you recover MP or DP based on using Dynamo mutation points. Remember those little beads in the top left? Yeah, those things. But that's about all it does. ESP, on the other hand, upgrades some skills, namely Mind Break and Phase Shift, as well as giving him a chance to reduce damage taken. If you don't have the skills it affects, it's basically just a damage reduction, which could be useful, but keep in mind that ESP is also a locked skill when Mind Circle is not. Choices, choices. With those handled, let's dive into his various skills. Remember that when in Awakening mode, Diabolic Esper consumes DP rather than MP. At level 45, Diabolic Esper is given a choice between Reverse Circle and Reverse Stigma. Reverse Circle requires 100 MP to cast and lets Diabolic Esper warp through space behind his enemy and fire a powerful shot, dealing a powerful piercing hit. It's quick and provides a nice strategy that you use to be agile and unpredictable around your opponent. Its cooldown and MP costs are also really low, making this move incredibly useful. On the other hand, Reverse Stigma is locked and also requires 100 MP to cast. It lets you do minor damage while being able to mark an enemy's location and then warp them back to that location before the move's timer runs out. Personally, I found Reverse Stigma almost entirely useless, and I couldn't even really think of a use for it in PvP, though I admit that it might have one. Given this and the fact that its applications are so few and far between, I think Reverse Circle is the obvious choice here. At level 50, Diabolic Esper can choose between Force Nova and Force Finger. Force Nova requires 25 MP to cast and creates a small burst of damage while recharging a portion of Diabolic Esper's MP or DP in Awakening. Force Finger requires only 15 MP to cast and works in basically the same way, except the burst damage has a much smaller radius in exchange for a small firing range instead. The MP recovery is the same. I personally went with Force Finger, but whichever you pick here is up to you. At level 55, Diabolic Esper can select either Moonlight Rhapsody or Gravity Buster. Moonlight Rhapsody is a neat attack that creates a small range of burst damage, but that's not the good part. It creates ripples around Diabolic Esper that debuff enemies once per second with up to 3 stacks. While afflicted, they will take many times as much damage as they normally would for the next attack to hit them before removing the stacks. These values actually end up pretty high, meaning you can deal several 100% your usual damage, which is really effective when using anything from Force Nova to Maximum Strike. Bear in mind though that unless you're soloing, someone else might use a weak hit on your target and remove the stacks before you can unleash hell. The other choice, Gravity Buster, is a far more conventional attack that creates a flashy light show of damage in front of Diabolic Esper doing decent damage. And yes, it really is that simple. Gravity Buster looks cool and has a pretty good burst damage, but that's about it. Considering the level this unlocks at, it's not really very strong, but it requires only 200 MP, you might say, and you'd be right. It's not meant to replace 300 MP skills. But at the same time, its utility over Moonlight Rhapsody is basically nil. Its initial burst damage is greater, sure, but that's it. So, my personal recommendation is to go with Moonlight Rhapsody. His final skill, Paranoia, is Diabolic Esper's Hyperactive, available like all others at level 65. It's very flashy and uses repeated cracks in space-time to hit enemies with great burst damage, while also afflicting them with 3 different elemental status effects which cause great damage over time. It is a bit harder to use as it doesn't hit anything below Diabolic Esper while casting, and the damage isn't quite as good as other hyperactives. But it is still powerful, looks awesome, and doesn't compete with any other skills, so get it. Diabolic Esper has a great range of skills, from minimal bursts to neat, unique status afflictions. With his focus on skills and his ability to use up to 700 pseudo MP worth of skills in succession, it's good that he has such skill variety and proficiency. Dang it, I was just talking about how Time Tracer struck a nice color balance and then they throw this at me? Jeez. Though, realistically, this design is pretty cool. Putting aside the color, the actual outfit is pretty slick, though the armorer's parts show some pretty heavy Evangelion influence. Not that that's a bad thing, of course. As for the colors, well, yeah, they don't have the same balance or contrast as Time Tracer, but they're still really cool. And damn, they really go with his Kakugan. His eyes. No, they're not like Kaneki's eyes at all. No, sir. Okay, so the inspiration that lent itself to this design is pretty clear. But hey, it's still a damn awesome design, second only to Time Tracer in my opinion. Dynamos included. Of all the second job quests, this has to be one of the least painful ever. You have to collect 60 drops from Nasods in Altera, which is not so hard once you're past level 35. Then you have to run 8 underground chapels and 8 altars of dedication. Mind you, they're a bit lengthy, but still not that bad overall. It can all be done in a day if you've got a stamina potion or 2 kicking around. All things considered, no complaints here. Diabolic Esper is even more conflicting for me than Time Tracer was. Well, okay, yeah, he's awesome and his skills are flashy and do great damage, and he's a beast in PvP. But he suffers from a few fundamental problems. One is the add skills syndrome, which gives him 5 of the same skills as other add paths, more than any other character. Worse than that though, Diabolic Esper pretty much sticks to a single skill tree layout. There's some variance here and there, like in Force Finger and Force Nova, but in most cases it's pretty clear which skill the average person is going to pick. It's very, very rare that I see anyone equipped with Stardust Shower, for example. While this wouldn't normally be a problem, the fact that Diabolic Esper relies so heavily on his skills over combos makes it a bit of a pain. But let's cut to the chase. Is Diabolic Esper fun to play? Well, sure. He's quick, powerful, and unique. His passives augment his MP, DP dual casting abilities, and you can pull off some pretty wicked combinations between his various skills and combos. But his lack of skill tree variance and lack of reliance on combos can make him, well, difficult to work with. I'll leave the rest up to your interpretation. My verdict is that you can only tell whether Diabolic Esper is worth playing by actually playing him. And with both his and Time Tracer's reasonable advancement quests, he's definitely worth trying. With the release of Diabolic Esper, we have concluded the release of all job paths of the characters available in North America. But Elsword has a lot of neat things coming this year, including a new town, new dungeons, a skill tree revamp, and even a new character. There's lots to see, so stay tuned. But until then, that's all I got for now. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to check out some other editorials or Let's Plays by clicking on the videos. Until next time, guys, I'll see you later.